Dad, I know this message isn't going to be easy to hear, but I think it would be better if you didn't come for Christmas this year. It'll be better for my little family that way. Renee and I have talked about it a lot. We need some space, at least for now. Please don't make this more difficult than it already is. I read it a second time, then a third. Then I set the phone down on the counter slowly, carefully, as if slowing down could buy me a few more seconds before I had to face what I'd just read. The coffee in my hand had gone cold without me noticing. I looked around the kitchen. The Christmas lights from Gerald's house across the street were still blinking through the window. Red, gold, white, red, gold, white. Outside it was cold. Inside it was quiet enough that I could hear the clock on the wall. And then, in that quiet, I felt something. Not anger, not heartbreak. Something closer to shame. The slow, private kind, like being the last person to understand a joke that everyone else had already laughed at and moved on from. Because the house my son was living in had my name on it. The car loan he drove to work every morning, I paid it. His son's private school tuition automatically deducted from my account every month. The credit card I'd given his wife for emergencies 3 days earlier had been used for $412 at a home goods store. I got out a legal pad. I started writing numbers. Nearly $100,000 a year. And the thing they decided to cut out of their lives right before Christmas was me. My name is Walter Gaines, 63 years old, 32 years as a structural engineer, a man who spent his entire career calculating exactly how much pressure a structure could bear before it gave way. I know precisely the moment when a material begins to fracture, even when the surface still looks perfectly intact. What I failed to recognize was that my own family had been cracking for years. And that night, sitting alone in that kitchen with a legal pad in front of me and the neighbor's Christmas lights blinking through the window, I made a decision. I want to tell you this story not because it ends beautifully, but because it ends honestly. And sometimes honest is worth a great deal more than beautiful. My son's name is Marcus, 35 years old. His wife's name is Renee. They have 2 children, Caleb, who is 8, and Lily, who just turned 5 in September. I remember Lily's birthday because I was the one who booked the venue for her party. I was the one who paid for it. Let me be specific. I think specifics matter because when people speak vaguely about money inside a family, everyone fills in the blanks with whatever number makes them most comfortable. The mortgage on the house in Pearland, $3,100 a month. The house is in my name because in 2021, when Marcus wanted to buy, his credit score wasn't where it needed to be. I stepped in as the primary borrower. That arrangement simply never changed. Nobody brought it up. Nobody corrected it. His car payment, $640. Renee's lease, $510. Marcus had remained on my health insurance since he lost his job during the pandemic, something that was supposed to be temporary and somehow became permanent without anyone noticing. Caleb's private school tuition, $1,520 a month, because Renee had strong feelings about the public school in their district. The supplementary card I'd given Renee for household emergencies, averaging $800 to $1,200 a month. I added it all up. Twice because I'm an engineer, and engineers don't trust a number they've only looked at once. $8,350 a month, just under $100,000 a year. To be told I had no place at the Christmas table. I want to be honest about something. My first feeling wasn't anger. I know that might surprise people. My first feeling was something far closer to embarrassment. The deep, quiet kind. The kind that settles behind your sternum and doesn't lift quickly. Like realizing you've been the last one to understand something that everyone else figured out a long time ago. Had Marcus been counting the days until I removed myself? Had Renee already told her friends she'd finally set a boundary with the difficult father-in-law? I stood in that kitchen in the blinking light coming through the window, and I felt like a fool. My wife Dorothy passed away 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. We had 38 years together, and I won't pretend those years were always smooth. We disagreed about money. We disagreed about Marcus, especially in his 20s when he was drifting between cities and jobs and versions of himself that never quite fit. But Dorothy loved that boy with a completeness I always admired, even in the moments I privately thought she was too easy on him. After she was gone, I think I tried to love Marcus the way she had. I opened my wallet, and I kept it open. I told myself it was for the grandchildren. I told myself Dorothy would have wanted this. Standing in that kitchen on that December night, I finally understood the truth. I had been using money to hold together a relationship I didn't know how to build with anything else. And Marcus had allowed it because it was convenient, and because he had learned a certain kind of avoidance from watching me practice it for 30 years. Dorothy would never have done that. She would have sat right where I was sitting, at that same kitchen table, calm and clear and steady, and she would have said exactly what needed to be said. No raised voices, no ultimatums, just the truth, delivered plainly to someone she loved enough to be honest with. She had a phrase she used when people overstepped, not an insult, just a quiet observation that landed like a door closing. She'd say pleasantly, almost gently, "You've wandered into a room that isn't yours." She said it softly. It stayed. I had always been the one who found that harder. Well, here we were. I opened the banking app on my phone. The mortgage autopay was scheduled for the 17th, 8 days away. I looked at the account number, the familiar green confirmation icon, the line item that had appeared on my statement so regularly I'd stopped seeing it. I pressed the button to cancel the recurring transfer. A dialog box appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" I pressed confirm. Then the car payments. Marcus's first, then Renee's. Then I navigated to the insurance portal and began the process of removing Marcus from my plan. It would take a few business days to complete, but I started it. Then I called the number on the back of my card and reported the supplementary card lost. They confirmed it would be deactivated within the hour. I sat with Caleb's tuition for a long time, longer than any of the other decisions, much longer, because Caleb hadn't sent me that message. Caleb was 8 years old and had no vote in any of this. Whatever was between Marcus and me, that boy was not a bargaining chip. I left the tuition alone, not as a favor to Marcus, as basic decency to a child who hadn't done a single thing wrong. I poured the cold coffee down the drain, made a fresh pot, drank it standing at the counter. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed earlier than usual. And I slept better than I expected to. That told me something about how long I had been carrying a weight I hadn't been able to name until that night. In the morning, I called Raymond, my attorney, a man who had handled my estate planning for 12 years and who has the useful quality of never asking more questions than a situation actually requires. I told him I wanted to review the house and discuss my options. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me pull the file." He drafted a formal notice stating that I intended to put the property on the market and that Marcus and Renee would need to make alternative housing arrangements. I signed it. Raymond sent it certified mail on Friday. Marcus called me Saturday morning at 8:47. I know the exact time because I was sitting on the back porch with my coffee, watching the red-shouldered hawk that had been visiting my back fence all autumn. I looked at the screen when the phone buzzed. He let it ring. Because some conversations deserve more than a man in his bathrobe with half a cup of coffee in his hand can give them. He called again at 9:12. Then Renee called at 9:31. Then Marcus again 4 times between 10 and 11. Then a text. "Dad, we got a letter from Raymond's office. What is going on? Please call me." Then a voicemail from Renee's mother, Patricia, a woman I had spoken to perhaps 8 times in 4 years, who apparently decided this was the moment to step fully into my life. Then a Facebook message from someone named Derek, a man I had met exactly once at a cookout at Marcus's house, who now felt sufficiently invested in my finances to inform me in considerable detail that I was making a mistake. I took my morning walk. Doctor's orders 45 minutes minimum. Ever since my blood pressure became a topic at my annual physical, the neighborhood was still dressed for Christmas. Half the inflatable decorations had gone limp overnight from the cold. There was a deflated snowman lying face down on someone's front lawn on Elm Street, and I registered it distantly, the way you notice things when your mind is somewhere else entirely. When I got home, I had 19 missed calls. I ate lunch. I read. At 2:15 in the afternoon, when I knew Renee would be out picking up the children, I called Marcus back. He answered before the first ring finished. "Dad, what is happening? Why did we get a letter from Raymond? Because I asked him to send it. You're selling the house? Where are we supposed to go?" I let that question sit in the air for a moment. Then I said, "I've been asking myself something similar, Marcus. Where were you planning for me to go for Christmas?" A long silence. That's not the same thing." "No," I said. "It isn't. I'm not selling the house as retaliation. I'm selling it because it is my house, my name, my mortgage, my legal liability, and I have been carrying the financial weight of a home I don't live in so that you and Renee could have a life you couldn't yet afford on your own. And the message you sent me Wednesday made very clear that you see me as something other than family. So I'm making some adjustments." He pivoted to the children. He talked about Caleb, about the school year, about how disruptive a move in the middle of the year would be. I told him I understood. I told him I had deliberately not touched Caleb's tuition and had no intention of doing so mid-year because the children were not responsible for the choices of their parents. He went quiet when I said that. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said, "but I need you to understand something. For 4 years, I have been supporting your household at a level that neither you nor Renee has ever acknowledged out loud, let alone expressed any gratitude for. Not once. And when you tell me by text message, Marcus, a text message that I don't belong at a holiday in a house that I own, there is a threshold of basic human decency that has been crossed, and I'm not going to pretend it hasn't been." Silence. Then quietly, "Renee is going to—" "I imagine she already has," I said. And then in a voice I hadn't heard from my son since he was maybe 16 years old, the voice he had before he learned to keep everything at a careful distance, he said, "I didn't really think about how that message sounded to you, Dad. I want to tell you that sentence broke something open in me, that I felt relief, or warmth, or something that resembled resolution. What I actually felt was tired, the deep, quiet kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, the kind that comes from waiting too long for something that was always possible." "I know you didn't," I said. "I gave them 60 days more than the legal minimum to find alternative housing. I told Marcus I was happy to help them understand their options, because I know more about real estate and personal finance than most people they'll ever sit across from, if they ever actually wanted to use me as a resource instead of a revenue source." I told him I loved him. I meant it, even saying it into the phone in my quiet living room in Bel Air, with 19 missed calls on my screen and a deflated snowman somewhere down the block. He didn't say it back. Not then. I didn't expect him to. And I was okay with that. The following week was genuinely unpleasant, not in a dramatic way, just the low-grade unpleasantness of something unresolved sitting in the corner of every room. Renee's mother left 2 more voicemails. Derek sent a follow-up Facebook message. I called Raymond twice to confirm the paperwork was moving correctly. I didn't sleep as well, not badly, just lightly. The way you sleep when something unfinished is sitting at the edge of your awareness. I kept my routines. Morning walk, breakfast, an hour of reading. I had been working through a biography of Robert Moses, a complicated man who shaped entire cities with a vision so total and so flawed that those cities are still untangling it. I found that relevant in ways I didn't try to examine too closely. My neighbor Gerald, a retired civil court judge, 71 years old, perceptive in the particular way that people become perceptive after decades of watching human beings lie to themselves in public, noticed something was off. Not because I told him. He knocked on my door one Tuesday evening with a container of his wife Marlene's crawfish étouffée and sat at my kitchen table, and he didn't ask any questions. We talked about Robert Moses and about the pothole at the end of Maple Street that the city had been ignoring for 11 months. It was one of the better evenings I had that December. 12 days after the original message, Marcus showed up at my door. No call ahead, no warning, just his car in the driveway at 10:40 on a Saturday morning, and then the doorbell. I had flour on my hands. I'd been making Dorothy's biscuit recipe, one of the few cooking skills she'd successfully transferred to me over 38 years of patient effort. I washed my hands. I went to the door. He looked tired. He'd lost something in his face, weight maybe, or just the particular ease of a man who hasn't had to think too hard about consequences. He was wearing the jacket I'd given him for his birthday the year before. He said, "Can I come in?" I stepped back. We sat at the kitchen table. The bowl of biscuit dough sat on the counter nearby. Neither of us mentioned it. He talked for a long time, and he didn't do it well. That's the only reason I believed him. He told me that Renee's father, a man I'd met 3 times, who had spent his daughters' entire childhoods giving gifts with invisible strings attached, had made a comment at a dinner Marcus hadn't told me about years earlier. Just a passing remark. That fathers-in-law who paid for things always expected to be repaid in obedience. Marcus told me that comment had settled into his head and slowly warped into something he never stopped to verify. He told me Renee had grown up in a house where generosity was a form of control, where love always came with a price attached, and that she had brought that fear into their marriage. And he had let her shape the story about me because it was easier than examining whether the story was accurate. At one point he pressed both hands flat on the table, like a man trying to hold something steady that keeps wanting to tip over. He is not good at this kind of conversation. He never has been. Neither am I, honestly. We are more alike in that than either of us has ever wanted to admit. When he finished, I got up and put the biscuits in the oven. I poured 2 cups of coffee. I sat back down across from my son, and I said something I hadn't planned to say but knew was true the moment it came out. I told him I understood more than he probably expected me to. I told him I had my own failures in this, that I had been easier to write a check to than to actually sit with, that I had let giving money become a pattern because it felt like love, even in the moments it was really avoidance. I told him that I needed something different from him going forward. Not just an apology. A different kind of relationship, one where he actually talked to me. About his work, his marriage, his life. The real things. Instead of asking me to fund a version of that life he didn't allow me to be part of. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know, Dad." I said, "I need you to know it for longer than this morning." He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. The biscuits burned slightly at the edges. We ate them anyway, both of us standing at the counter with paper towels, because neither of us suggested sitting back down at the table, and somehow standing there in my kitchen eating slightly overdone biscuits without saying anything for a while felt exactly right. I want to stop here for a moment, because I think this matters. If you have ever been in a relationship where your value was measured by what you provided, rather than who you were, where your presence was tolerated, and your generosity was simply absorbed without acknowledgement, without thanks, without anyone ever looking up from what you'd given them to actually see you, you know the particular exhaustion of that place. You know how quietly it happens. You don't realize you've become a function until someone inadvertently reminds you that you always were one. And that reminder, as painful as it is also a door opening. It is someone telling you, without meaning to, exactly where the exit is. Now, I want to be very clear about something, because this is not the kind of story where everything returns to the way it was before and someone calls that healing. I did not cancel the sale of the house. The house went on the market in January. Marcus and Renee found a rental in the Heights in February, smaller, a different part of the city, a different school district. Moving into that house required a series of conversations between them about income, spending, and priorities, that from what Marcus told me later they had never actually had in 6 years of marriage. Real conversations, the hard kind. I helped them move. I rented a truck and drove it myself, which Marcus protested loudly and which I ignored completely. Caleb changed schools. I won't pretend that was easy. He had a difficult couple of months. But Caleb is a resilient kid. I like to think that quality comes from somewhere, and by March he had a best friend at the new school and had joined a soccer league. Lily, being 5, mostly just wanted to know if the new house had a backyard with grass. It does. That was sufficient for her. The supplementary card did not come back. That chapter is closed. Marcus and Renee manage their own finances now, for the first time in their marriage. It's tighter. I know that. Marcus told me directly, and the fact that he told me directly was itself something new. I noticed when he said it, that he sat up a little straighter, like a man who has just discovered what it feels like to carry his own weight. I spent Christmas this past year at Gerald and Marlene's house, which was not the plan and turned out to be unexpectedly, genuinely fine. Marlene made a standing rib roast. There were grandchildren of theirs running around who I'd never met, and they accepted my presence the way small children do when they are warm and fed, which is to say completely, without conditions, without history. At some point during the afternoon, a 5-year-old named Jerome climbed into the armchair beside mine and fell asleep against my shoulder. I sat there for 40 minutes without moving, not wanting to wake him, and I thought, this is fine. This is more than fine. Marcus called me Christmas morning. We talked for 43 minutes. He told me about Caleb's soccer and about Lily's new obsession with drawing horses. She covers every available surface, apparently. And at the end of the call, a little awkwardly, in the way he always does things that cost him something, he said he hoped I had a good day. I'm going to, I told him, and I meant it. What I understand now, sitting here in my kitchen in Bel Air with a fresh cup of coffee in Gerald's house dark across the street because it's past midnight and the Christmas lights have been taken down, is that what happened with Marcus was never primarily about a text message. It was the result of years of accumulated choices made by both of us. Cause and effect doesn't always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it coils slowly, and you don't feel it until it has already been tightening for years. I gave Marcus money because it was easier than giving him my full attention. I told myself that was love, and it was, partly. But it was also avoidance. I wrote checks instead of having hard conversations. And in doing that, year after year, I taught him without a single direct word that my role in his life was financial, that I could be managed, that I was, in some fundamental sense, a resource to be used rather than a father to be respected. I didn't intend any of that. I'm certain Marcus didn't consciously understand any of it either. But intention doesn't change outcome. That's the part nobody wants to sit with. When I canceled those payments, I was not punishing my son. I was stopping a pattern that I had helped create. There is a difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge wants the other person to suffer. Consequence just lets reality arrive. I stepped out of the way and let reality arrive. The people who genuinely love you can handle your honesty. They may not respond well to it at first. They may flood your voicemail and recruit near strangers to weigh in on your decisions. But the relationship that survives that honesty is real in a way the previous one simply wasn't. And real, even when it's uncomfortable, is worth more than comfortable and hollow. Marcus and I talk now. Not every week, but regularly. We talk about things other than money, which is new for us. He told me last spring that he'd started keeping a budget for the first time in his adult life. He said it with a kind of quiet pride I recognized immediately. It was the same pride I felt the first time I signed a contract as a junior engineer 40 years ago. The pride of a man who has done something on his own. I thought about Dorothy when he told me that. I thought, there he is. That's the son she always believed was in there. I believe it too. I just needed to stop getting in his way. Before I let you go, drop a comment below. 1, 2, or 3. 1, if you think I made the right call from the beginning. 2, if you think I should have had the direct conversation before taking any action. 3, if you're not sure if this story made you think about something in your own life that you haven't fully sorted out yet. I read every comment. I want to know where you land. And tell me where you're watching from. What city? What time of night? What's your situation? This story came out of Houston, but I know it isn't only a Houston story. I know it belongs to a lot of people in a lot of places who are sitting somewhere right now with a cold cup of coffee and an uncomfortable truth sitting in the corner of the room. If something I said tonight touched something real in your life, a parent, a child, a relationship where money and love got tangled up in ways that were hard to separate, I'd love to hear it. You don't have to share everything. Just let me know you're out there. If this is the kind of story you come here for, the honest ones, the complicated ones, the ones that don't resolve neatly, but resolve truly, then hit subscribe and stay close. There are more of these. There will always be more of these, because that's what life is. A series of moments where we choose, imperfectly, to move toward the people we love or away from the patterns that no longer serve us. And sometimes, if we're lucky, those two things turn out to be the same choice. I think about Dorothy in moments like this. I think she'd give me a look, not a disappointed look, but an amused one. The look she had when something took me longer to understand than it should have. There you go, she'd say. You finally figured it out. I hope she's right. I'm working on it. This is a fictional story, inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined, set in Houston, Texas, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is entirely coincidental.